Alrighty, so basically what you're going to need to do this job is some extensions, a 10 millimeter, a 12 millimeter, and a 14 millimeter. You can use wrenches. You'll need at least one ratcheting wrench so you can get into some tight spaces. You'll need a Phillips head, a flathead, and a pair of needle nose pliers. This is for convenience, the flathead. You don't need it to do the job, but it is nice to have. And then obviously you'll need the bushings to install in the truck. Alright, so now that we're inside the truck, what you're going to want to do is remove 4 Phillips head screws around the perimeter of your center console right here. You're going to want to keep those in a somewhat safe place. You're going to rotate this off just like that and set it to the side. And then you're going to want to take out these 10 millimeter bolts surrounding the perimeter of the plate, just like that. You can see where they go right here. The amount of bolts and where they're located will depend on what type of truck you have. This is a pre-runner V6. It's a 99. I just installed some of these on a 2002 pre-runner 4-cylinder, and there were fewer bolts and the plate was kind of arranged differently. So it'll depend on what truck you have, but basically you're going to want to remove all of the 10 millimeter bolts holding the plate down. Once you do that, you're going to want to go underneath the truck, and there's going to be a pin holding your shift linkage together. You're going to want to remove that pin so you can pull this up through the floor. And I almost forgot, but you're also going to want to unclip the wiring harness from the body of the truck. So there's just one clip here at the back. You pull that off and you're good to go. Once I get this out of the truck, we're going to take it to the tailgate, disassemble it, and I'll show you guys how to install the shifter bushings. But real quick, I'm going to go under the truck and show you that pin that you need to take out. Alright guys, now that we're under the truck, you can see the shift linkage right here. You're just going to follow the rubber shift boot down to where the linkage meets up, and then you can use your needle nose pliers to remove your pin. This is not the factory pin, this is just like a ball joint cutter pin because I lost my pin. But once the pin's out, you can take and just sort of push the linkage to the side like that. It won't be very hard, it's pretty loose, you can remove it pretty easily. That'll fall to the side, and then the shifter will be ready to come out the bottom of the truck, and then you can go from there. So now that that's loose, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to take it to the tailgate and show you guys how to install the bushings. Alright, so here's the assembly. Basically, the first step you're going to want to do is you're going to want to remove these 3 Phillips head screws holding the sort of shift indicator down. They're just going to be at sort of, there's one at the bottom and 2 at the upper left and right hand corners. Oh, there we go, almost dropped it. So you're going to take those out. I've pre-disassembled this, so I'm only taking 2 out, but there are 3. There's one here, and then on the other side there's one here. They're fairly obvious, you really can't miss them, but for the sake of clarity I am including that. So then you'll be greeted with this little white switch. If you don't loosen this, you won't be able to proceed. So there's going to be a bolt here, one here, and one there. So once you get this out of the way, there's a 14 millimeter bolt head right here. You want to hold that still because that's the rod that connects this sort of tube right here to the shift handle, and that's where the play occurs. But once that's loose, you're going to want to loosen your 12 millimeter nut right here, and then flip it over here, pull off these. Now once those are loose, pull them out, put them over there. You can wiggle this to the side. I'll show you on reassembly, but make sure when you reassemble this that you get this pin placed inside the switch. Otherwise, what will happen is you won't be able to take your key out of the ignition and you won't be able to start your truck. So we're going to move that to the side, and now the head of the bolt is free to be held with the 9/16 or 14 millimeter socket, which I have misplaced. But basically, you're going to hold that still. You're going to loosen the 12 millimeter. Once that's off, you can push it out just like that. Now that rod that you pushed out will just slide out from the side just like this. You can set that to the side, and now you have mostly disassembled the first shaft. Now, to get at the second one, there's this little clear plate right here, You're going to want to pry that off. Mine's pretty easy to get off because I've done this a bunch of times. However, if you've never taken it off before, I recommend taking a flathead, prying it up, and just pulling it off like that. It's very helpful. But you're going to want to loosen this first. Then you're going to want to take this little box here and just wiggle it off of its bracket. Once you get it off of its bracket, you can take this whole cluster of stuff right here and pull it back like that, revealing a secondary shaft right here, whose bushings are also more than likely disintegrated. So now that the shifter is out of the truck, you can get at that shaft. It's going to be the same exact setup as what's on top. This is kind of hard to show because of this boot here. This boot doesn't actually disconnect, which is inconvenient, but there's going to be a 12 millimeter bolt right there, just like that. You're going to want to loosen it, and then the shaft itself is going to come out just like the other one did. It's actually the exact same design, it's just shorter. It's going to slide out right through here. You can kind of see the indent where they clearanced it, so you can pull it out. I'm going to go ahead and take that off, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so once you have that smaller secondary shaft out, you will be in a position where you can sort of finagle the whole thing around and get your bushings in. I'm going to show you that in just a second, but I just thought it'd be worth mentioning that you can also remove this little light here, pull that out just like that, and also disconnect it right here, and you can move this whole thing out of the way. So I actually didn't know that until just now, so that would have been helpful to know before, but now you guys know, so you can move this out of the way and avoid some unnecessary frustration. Alright, so with all of that out of the way, you have a very clear view of what you need to do. What I would recommend is pushing the button down like this, and you should be able to finagle the whole thing out and sort of kick this out past that flange, and you'll be able to remove what may or may not remain of your old bushings and throw them away. And then you'll also be able to get at this secondary shaft here. Okay, so you'll take your new bushings, pre-lubed, and you'll just slide them right into place of where your factory ones went. These are, again, they are much stiffer than the factory rubber ones. They are urethane, so they will last longer, and yeah, so it'll go in just like that, and no more play. So as you can see, it's pretty simple to put these in. Of course, the install is the reverse of the uninstall of the shifter. So once you're at this point, basically you are all good and set to go. So I put one in here. I'll go ahead and put a second one in the secondary shaft here just to prove that they are both the same size. So there's no worrying there. You don't need to pay attention or anything like that. It's not like you're going to put the wrong size in the wrong hole or anything. So I'm going to put that in one-handed. There we go. That's pretty good. And yeah, so 2 new shifter bushings installed. Again, I'm going to reassemble all of this, put it back in the truck, and then I will show you guys a before and after of a truck that has no shifter bushings at all and one that does have shifter bushings installed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you guys that right now. Alright, so I've reassembled the shifter here. The truck is on, so I can shift it, foot on the brake, and this is with no shifter bushings in the truck. You can see a lot of side-to-side play. You can clearly hear it. It'll move up and down a little bit. There's a lot of play sort of like up and to the left. Shifting it back and forth is in general just not like very pleasant. There's a lot of movement between gears, so it's just not ideal. Now I'm going to show you guys with shifter bushings installed. Alright, so the shifter's reinstalled. I put the pin back in the shift linkage, and so I'm just going to show you guys how much play these bushings will eliminate once they're installed. So you just saw the before the bushings, hit the brake. Now you can see after the bushings, there's like no side-to-side play. I'm putting a good amount of sort of oomph into it there. And then also you don't have that thing where it'll like go up into the side pretty far. So in between gears, very much so responsive. You can see how it kind of, I don't know, holds itself in place much better than without bushings. And so, yeah, hopefully you can tell via the video that that is a pretty big difference. There's a little bit of play back and forth, but that's just kind of what the truck has by default. But like side to side, there's pretty much none. Up and down, there's absolutely none. So, yeah, hopefully this demonstrates the difference pretty clearly.